Hello, hello, Jamie here. How's everybody doing? It is, what day is it? It's October. It's October, you guys. I don't know when it turned to October, but it is October 2nd. And this is our stimulus Q&A for October 2nd. So you might be watching me over in my Facebook group, Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners. If you're not in it, please come join us over there. We're having conversations and answering your questions about all this fun stuff. Also on my Facebook page, and this is live on my YouTube channel as Jamie Troll. So make sure you're subscribing over there. And from wherever you are right now, say hello so that I know that you can hear me. So I see Marissa. Anybody who's here, say hey. Sorry I'm late, guys. I'm gonna out myself. I totally, I had an appointment, but it wasn't it wasn't really a work-related appointment. I was getting my nails done. It ran over a little bit, maybe because I got 5 different colors on my nails. That might have been the problem. I didn't quite put in enough time for getting 5 different colors on my nails, but I felt like I needed some like fall enjoyment. I don't know about you guys. I am all about all things fall. I've decorated my entire house. I can't get into the pumpkin spice latte thing though. That's just one. It doesn't taste very good, you guys. It doesn't taste very good. Okay. All right. I see Candy. I see Judith. I see James. Hey guys, welcome. Okay. So let's chat a little bit about what is going on. So update for those who did not see it. I have linked, if you're watching me on Facebook, it's going to be above you. If you're watching me on YouTube, it's probably going to be below you. I have linked the live I did on Wednesday. This past Wednesday, I did a live all about the HEROES Act 2. So I actually jumped into it. I talked about the proposed changes to PPP, EIDL, unemployment. Now, this is a proposal, still a proposal. It has passed the House. It won't pass the Senate, at least not the way that it's written currently. Okay, so that's something to know, but it is kind of the basis for the discussion that is still ongoing about this next round of stimulus. So that's important to know that it's fairly wide-reaching. I mean, the actual bill itself is 2,000 pages. The summary, which you can get if you hit that link and go to the video that I'm talking about that I did on Wednesday, I include a link to the summary, which is still 87 pages. There's a lot. So it's not just things for business owners, obviously. It has a lot of things in there about coronavirus testing, money for schools, money for specifically the airline industry because of the layoffs and things like that are going on there. There is a lot of stuff that's kind of packed in here. Rental assistance. So for people who need help with paying their mortgage or their rent, there's some provisions for that. So again, has not passed. Let's talk about kind of where it is in the kind of spectrum of what's been going on, right? Overall, Democrats, this is a $2.2 trillion bill that Democrats are trying to propose. They had a $3.4 trillion bill in May, the HEROES Act 1. Now we have the HEROES Act 2, which is a $2.4 trillion bill. Now the Republicans have come up, it seems like. The last bill that they actually proposed was around $500 billion. So that's billion versus trillion. Obviously, that's pretty far. That was the Republican skinny bill. That one did not make it very far. So now the Republicans appear to have come up to, at least through Mnuchin, who's really doing, it's really Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin who are really doing the majority of the discussions on this topic. And it seems like Mnuchin has kind of countered this $2.2 trillion HEROES Act bill that passed the House yesterday with about a $1.6 trillion bill that has some of the same things in it. Now, granted, we haven't seen the bill. This is just kind of an idea, I guess, of a bill that he has agreed to. But they probably are still a little farther apart than they want to be. So I think we're hopeful for a deal. It's kind of going to depend a little bit on what the president does, because if the president starts, as he has before, kind of actually signaling that he's okay with a larger amount, I don't know that he would sign on for a full 2.2 trillion. So the answer is probably going to end up somewhere in the middle if they can get to a place in the middle. We've been talking about this for a couple of months, right? So y'all are probably with me and like, okay, can you just get it together? Can you figure out a couple of these things? But a lot of the stuff that impacts you probably are not the things that they're really arguing about outside of maybe the unemployment benefits. So that is one of the things in the HEROES Act 2 that it goes back up to $600 per week in the new HEROES Act 2 that's proposed by the Democrats. The Republicans still want something less than that, but they do agree that there needs to be some additional support for people who are still on unemployment because of COVID. So where that will end up, we'll have to wait and see. The House actually goes out in recess. I think today is the last day that they are in, but again, they've already voted. Now it's going to be what happens in the Senate. And I think the Senate's technically only around for another week. So we have to see what's going to happen. I think this is going to be a big week to figure out if anything is going to get passed before the election. I am sort of feeling like if something doesn't happen in the next week, that we might be at a place where it's going to be after the election before anything is done. And then it may be even harder, just depending on what the climate is at that point in time. So hopefully we will get something. They do agree on the $1,200 stimulus. So if a bill gets passed, you will get another $1,200 if you're under the income limits. If you got it before, you'd probably get another one. And then you get $500 per dependent, even for dependents over the age of 17. So that was one of the changes that was made in the HEROES Act and probably would be in the final one as well. So we'll have to wait and see. Let me know what questions you guys have. If you got questions about PPP forgiveness, if you got questions about EIDL, like I said, I did a whole debrief. I mean, not on all the things in the HEROES Act 2, because like I said, it's 2,000 pages, but I did a debrief on the way it would impact PPP, EIDL. There's actually a new grant program that is proposed in that, which I want you guys to stick around because that one is one you're going to want to know about if it does pass. So again, make sure you're subscribing and make sure you're over in our Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners Facebook group, because I want you guys to be the first to know about it if and when it does pass, because right now that new grant program would give you additional money that you could use. It would be kind of like the EIDL advance, but it would be potentially quite a bit more, up to 6 months of operating expenses and or up to $50,000. So if you got a lot less than that, probably with the EIDL advance, this could be quite a bit more, but there's only $40 billion, which I know sounds like a lot. It's not a lot in the grand scheme of things. So if something similar to what's in the HEROES Act 2 passes, I want you guys sticking around, because if somebody's going to get that money, I want you guys to get that money, and I want to make sure you're aware of it and what you need to do to get your hands on it. Okay. All righty. Thank you. I got a new camera this past weekend, and I'm very jazzed about it. It makes me happy. Thank you. You guys are sweet. Okay, I need questions. Where are my questions? So they do have the HEROES Act 2 is out there. The other is kind of an outline. I haven't seen anything about minutions that has been actually drafted up, but it's probably pretty similar to some of the other Republican bills that have been released. So I've only seen a summary at this point, but the HEROES Act 2 is out there. You can see if you hit the link to the video I did wherever you were watching. You're on YouTube, so it's probably down here. If you hit the link to that video, in the header to that HEROES Act video, I linked the entire 2,000-page act for the HEROES Act. So if you really want to jump into it, which I went a little bit down a rabbit hole the other day, just a little bit. So if you really want to spend some time going through it, please do. But the summary is what I did was I looked at the summary, and then if I wanted to read a little bit deeper, for example, like the PPP wording and things like that, then I jumped into that section in the bill versus just trying to actually read the bill, because I don't even think the senators are doing that. Okay, let's see. Okay, is there a rule that we have to use EIDL funds by a certain date? No, there's no rule as to when you have to use EIDL funds. That said, it is an emergency grant, right? Or not grant, it's an emergency loan. Sorry, the advanced rate, but it's an emergency loan. So if you have it and sit on it for 3 years and they come and say, what did you spend this on? And you're like, I actually didn't. that probably isn't going to fly too well. I wouldn't imagine. You can sit on it. A lot of people got it kind of as an insurance policy. So you can sit on it. But if you don't use it through this COVID time period and you get through this and you're kind of back to normal status quo and the world is back to status quo and you still don't use it, I would then pay it back versus holding on to it. Because otherwise, if they come back and say, like, what did you use the money on? You're like, oh, I actually didn't spend it. That's probably not the purpose of it, right? It's not necessarily meant to be an emergency fund for a long period of time for businesses. It's meant to be used for emergencies and actually used. And they want people to put this money back into the economy. I mean, that's one of the thought processes behind all of this stimulus money that they're putting out there, is that really the hope from a government economic standpoint is that that money just gets replowed into the economy to restart the economy, right? So, yes, they're spending, but the hope is that that spending actually goes to revitalizing our economic growth. So they want you to spend it. If you just hang on to that money, that might not be the best thing. And I don't know that that would be a great thing if you were ever audited to tell them. In its current form, no, I would say no, because there's no bipartisan support. So it is supported by the Democrats. So the House is controlled by the Democrats, slight majority. So it passed the House, right? The Senate is controlled by Republicans, again, fairly slight majority, but you're not going to, if you don't have any crossover votes, if you have no bipartisan support for something, which right now these bills just don't, they're just far apart enough that nobody's signing on to the other, then you're going to have a problem, right? So right now that bill has basically zero Republican support, the one that passed. But the thing about that, though, is a lot of the things within the bill do have bipartisan support, right? Or they're close enough that they could work out something. But there are a few things that are still contentious. One of the big things is state and local funding for state and local governments. Republicans don't really want to do it or don't want to do much of it. Democrats want to do more. There's some just contention around that. And then there's some contention around sort of legal liability and limiting legal liability for businesses. So there are a few things that are fairly contentious in there, but those arguments are holding up the rest, right? Because it's kind of leverage. So it's just part of the negotiation process. I do see them coming closer. I'm hopeful. I mean, at this point, it's almost like, come on, guys, can't we just agree on what's $700 billion between friends, right? At this point, but we will have to see. So if something is really important to you, this is what I keep telling people. I don't want people to get in too much of a fury about it, right? Because it's not healthy to just sit and be frustrated about something and over-index on it. Obviously, you need to focus on doing what's best for your business, but also if there's something that would be a huge thing, like a second round of PPP loans or another grant program or, something like that, write into your senators, call your senators and Congress people. The more they hear from people, right, from actual people, the more of a push there is to actually do something. So I would make sure that you're writing your representatives, because that's what they're there for. That's who you elected, whether you voted for them or not, that's who you elected collectively. So they are supposed to listen to their constituents. And the more that they hear about it, the more likely they are to feel the pressure that something needs to happen. So that's what I would recommend if that's you. Okay. Will a new PPP also be available for companies to get a second round if they already received the first? Yes, indeed. So the way that it's written, there would be a second round. I think you would still, if you haven't gotten a PPP, you'd still be eligible to. So if you missed out on that and you're mad that you did, you probably would be able to get one. And you would be able to get a second one under this HEROES Act proposal. That seems to have fairly bipartisan support as well. It's just a matter of where that threshold ends up being. So I think this one came in at, I'm getting my percentages confused, so go watch my video, but I think it was 25% now. It kind of keeps coming down. So as long as you had at least a 25% drop, I think quarter over quarter, picking a quarter from 2020 and comparing it to 2019, then you'd be able to get a second PPP loan. Also, they would be expanding what you could use PPP for, including things like PPE, et cetera. So you would have a little bit more leeway in what you could use it for and be forgiven. So that is what I would, but I would go back. You can go back and watch the whole thing too, because I talked a little bit more about changes to PPE. One of the other big things that was in there that I thought was a really cool surprise that I want to tell people is if this passes, it looks like it would eliminate that whole craziness around removing your EIDL advance from your PPP forgiveness, right? That it was going to reduce your PPP forgiveness if you got that EIDL advance. Well, there are provisions in there that make it easier to get forgiveness. That's that blanket forgiveness we were talking about. Basically, you wouldn't have to be giving as much in support to get your loan forgiven. And they likely would not be removing that EIDL advance from it. So that's a really good thing, especially for those of you guys who got maybe a few $1,000s in EIDL advance and you're worried about what it's going to do to your PPP. I know some people who got more of an EIDL advance than they did a PPP loan, which obviously then kind of just doesn't make sense. So if that passes in its current form, or if those types of provisions make their way into the final bill, I think that would be a good thing for most of you guys. Okay. Let's see. Bree's making me laugh. Let's see. Okay, I stopped certifying for PUA when I went back to work full time. Is there a way to notify the state when I went back to work, or do I keep certifying or backlog certification? So I think in most states, I believe you just stop certifying. There may be something additional that you have to do to actually let them know that you're back to work. It depends on the state. So I would read what you get from your state as far as the directions and what you're supposed to do to kind of stop those benefits to make sure that you are doing it the best way. But every state is a little bit different in how they're administering PUA and just regular unemployment in general. So I would check with them. I agree. Like that one really, that one just struck out to me that I was like, oh, that is very smart. And they said they basically implied that it was an error that they wrote it that way to begin with, but it was very intentionally written in there. So that seemed a little interesting. They're like, oh, our bad. We didn't mean to put that in there. I think just because of the consternation that it was causing. I also think they didn't realize how many people were going to go after the EIDL advances, which is kind of silly because it was free money. So I think they didn't realize the volume and the fact that like almost everybody that got a PPP loan, I must guess, or a large majority of them probably also got the EIDL advance. And then I think they said, okay, this is getting a little too complicated. Let's simplify this a little bit, which I think is a smart thing. Let's see. I always get this question and I always answer it the same way. Unfortunately, no. I do not believe that the EIDL loan might be forgiven. Now, they did include in this HEROES Act 2, if anything similar were to pass in the final bill, that you would have the ability, if you had a hardship, to potentially get the interest rate reduced and potentially even defer payments up to 4 years. Now, that would not be automatic, at least the way it's written right now. You'd have to work with your bank around that. But I don't think they're just going to forgive all of it, right? Now, remember, there are no personal guarantees on this. If you got under $25,000, you have no collateral guarantees, so consider that as well. But I do not think that they are going to outright forgive everybody who got these EIDL loans. I would be very surprised if they did that. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Do you expect it will run dependent to new loan disbursement date or contingent with original loan date? To new loan I'm not sure if I know what you mean by it. It will run dependent to new loan disbursement date. Clarify that, because I'm not sure exactly what you are talking about. Do you mean like with the PPP, if you got a second PPP? I think there would be a new date, a new start date for that money. Let's see, because a lot of people are already up with their PPP loan time frame. So I think it would start the clock again for the second loan. So I assume you mean independent contractors. So you shouldn't really be getting both for the same time period. So if you're using PPP to pay yourself for roughly 10 weeks, because that's about how much pay it is, 2.5 months, you should either not be claiming PUA during that time, or if you are, you should be entering that PPP likely in as income. Now, I will always say every state is a little bit different in how they're doing this, so I can't really give a blanket statement on this. But in general, if you are getting PPP and you're getting PUA for the same time period, and you are not claiming that PPP anywhere, then that could be considered double dipping. So I would probably not do that if I were you. I think I would pick the one that makes the most sense for you, right? So if PPP is more, then go with PPP. Then you can go back on PUA after your PPP period, or just don't do PPP at all, or potentially you have the option too of not trying to get forgiven for the PPP and taking the PPP money and continuing to take PUA. But again, there's a lot of gray area in all of this. And I don't want to advise anybody on anything. Not advice. I'm not your CPA. Don't sue me. But I would check with your state and see what rules they have around this. But I do think, I will say this. I do think while things are disorganized right now, a lot of people are probably going to get money that they should not get. Whether that's because the unemployment offices are overrun and they're just not adjusting the claim amounts, or what's happening. And I do see there potentially being a reckoning in the future where they could claw back some of what was paid, especially if you've got multiple different things. Now, that doesn't apply if you got like EIDL. That's a loan. You have to pay it back. It's not double dipping to get EIDL and PPP. It's not double dipping to get EIDL and PUA, right? But especially when you're talking about PPP, PUA, different grants as well, like you probably want to be careful there to make sure you're checking what the state rules are around all of that, to make sure you're claiming it and you're not putting yourself in a position where you potentially would have to pay that back, and potentially pay that back with, fines and penalties or something later on. So we're going to have to wait and see, right? Like right now, we're kind of still in the administration of all this craziness and they're trying to figure out what to do. On the back end of that, that's when you have audits. That's when you have people coming back out and saying, hey, what did you get? What did you do with this money? This isn't to scare people, because I really do feel like the people who are trying to do things the right way are going to be fine. They're going to be by and large, looking for people who are blatantly taking advantage of the system. Don't be one of those people, okay? Do your best to follow the rules. And I know everybody that watches me, the reason you're watching me is because you want to do the best that you can to follow the rules. It's hard when the rules just don't all fully exist. So that makes it difficult, but do your best to just, follow the rules as they are. And then use common sense for the rest of it, right? Like if there's not a rule, use common sense. What do we think the purpose of the rule really was? Okay. Let's see. New PPP for second round for companies that will receive the first round. I started my business in January, was able to show a loss. I think it's going to be hard to get a second round of PPP for new businesses, unfortunately. At least what's going to happen, so just FYI on how this works, whatever stimulus bill is passed, which hopefully there will be something passed, if there's a second round of PPP, it will have some guidelines. Those guidelines probably will not go into the level of detail that you're asking about. That's going to come when Treasury interprets and makes the actual actionable rules for that bill. So they're going to take the bill and they're going to say, okay, now here are the rules, and they're going to issue, interim final rules and things like that to guide you on what to do, and FAQs and all of that kind of stuff. So that's how it's been going, right? They don't put all the rules into the act, which is amazing because it's 2,000 pages. You'd think it would have everything, but ultimately it doesn't. They put that on Treasury Treasury and the SBA to work and create the rules and what people need to do. And then we find out. But my guess would be that they're going to focus on the businesses that can basically show very clear evidence of how hard that they have been hit, right, for this second round of PPP loans, because they're going to go after the hardest hit. I think you also have to have, I could be confusing this, I believe it's under 200 employees for the second round of PPP. I think that's right. I think I'm also thinking about the 50, I think the new grant they're proposing would be for people with under 50 employees. Hopefully I don't have those switched, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Make sure to go and check out that 87 pager that's attached to the video wherever you're watching this, and see kind of the guidelines. Let's see. Okay. What about businesses that got over 25K that might go out of business? Heard some say, well, no personal guarantee. So what would SBA do if business dissolved? Well, they have first claim to all of your assets. So if you have any business assets, they would be able to lay claim to those business assets if you got over $25,000 of a loan. Believe you me, they will often find ways to get their money. So I'm curious to see if this ends up in like, if somehow that they're able to claim it through like IRS through taxes and things like that, where they claim back their money. I really honestly don't know, but just going out of business does not absolve you of having to pay necessarily, right? And it can also impact your personal credit too. So just some things to think about if you are in that spot. Let's see. Is there any coverage options for prior to PPP loan date or between PPP 1 and possible PPP 2? If you mean coverage, like covered period, probably not. I think it's your covered period for the PPP loan is the date you got it. Now, that said, if it's like the last PPP loan, right? If you were unable to pay your rent, let's say, and you paid 3 months worth of rent, 2 months worth backdated rent, and 1 month of actual rent with your PPP loan once you got it, those previous rent payments, even though they related to prior periods because they happened while you had the money, were able to count for PPP. So if you can't pay your bills and then you get your PPP loan and you back pay the things that you are allowed to pay PPP with, like rent, utilities, payroll, then you would be able to count that. But they have to either be paid or incurred during the period to count, right? So either they are incurred, i.e. their actual expenses for that period, or if they're from before, you have to pay them during your PPP covered period for it to count, if that makes sense. Now, that doesn't mean hold off on paying your bills, waiting for a second round of PPP. I probably wouldn't do that. Oh, no. Sorry, guys. Spam caller. Don't they know I have a live right now? Okay, two more questions. What should we do? I got a bunch of them. Maybe more. Let's see. When your 24 weeks is up for PPP and you submit the info to have it forgiven, how would I explain the following? We have used the 75% for payroll. It's actually now 60%, by the way, is the floor for payroll. And we have the same number of staff. However, not every staff member has received payroll because not all services have had requests and some staff only perform certain jobs. So you do have to do your FTE count. It all depends on, I would take a look at your payroll provider and how they're doing your FTE count, because those are all going to vary a little bit in how they do it. But your payroll provider, most of them like ADP, Gusto, the big ones should all have reports that are reports you can use for these types of things that should do your FTE count for you and your comparison and all of that information. I would look at, it depends on how things are really recorded in your payroll system as to how that's going to pull out. So I would take a look at those and see what that looks like, and then you can plug the information into my PPP tracker as well. So jamietroll.com/PPP tracker. You can go check that out and plug all the information in. But it really varies, and it depends on whether they were they a full-time employee before, part-time employee. There's a lot of things that go into that calculation. So I would check your payroll reports and see how they are doing those calculations to see where you fall and if you meet the guidelines or not, if that makes sense. But there are a lot of variations on how to do that calculation. So you're going to want to look back into your payroll provider. Let's see. For EIDL loan, you said under 25K, no collateral or personal guarantee. So what do you think will happen if we end up out of business? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think it will have a credit impact even on your personal credit. I don't know though what else would happen because, right, you don't have personal guarantees and you don't have collateral. So I don't know that there would be much other recourse that they would have, but I'm not a lawyer. So hashtag not a lawyer. I don't know for certain. And I don't want anybody to go into this because, right, when we take out an obligation, the intention should always be to pay that obligation back, right? We don't want to take out an obligation thinking like, well, I just won't pay it back. And, and not that anybody is doing that. I'm not accusing you of that at all, but it is yet to be seen how all of this plays out. I would guess though, to be honest, they're probably expecting a decent number of these to default. I would guess. And the level that you are impacted probably will depend on how big your loan is, right? But I would try to set out a plan to pay that money back. And if you're out of business and you can't, then, you may have to take the hit if you decide that that's the best thing for you financially. But it just depends on, how they end up kind of, I don't want to say going after people, but you know what I mean? There's not, again, they're not going to take your house. They're not going to take your car. They don't have the ability to do that. So, weigh your consequences. Okay. Yes. So that's their average annual salary or hourly pay. It gets a little bit more difficult if there's not a lot of guidance as to how this works if you have a fully variable payroll, right? If your payroll is paid per job and the jobs just went down, then that gets a little bit squirrely. So the point is the 25% rule is around hourly, or my personal opinion is if they, and again, this is an opinion, this is not written anywhere, but the way that I read into the guidelines is this, that it's talking about your average annual salary or hourly wage, i.e. $30,000 a year, $17 an hour. If you don't pay them that way and your pay is entirely variable, commission-based, based on jobs, whatever, I don't think you have I think basically their annual hourly or average salary, they're not salaried and they're not hourly, it'd be zero. So in that case, where it impacts you though, could be on the FTE calculation, maybe, but that's a little bit hard to do if you're not paying them hourly, if you don't know how many hours they're putting in. So it really gets a little bit squirrely, I guess I would say, if you had employees that you just aren't paying anymore, right? Or aren't paying very much anymore. They don't give a lot of guidance as to how that's going to work out in your FTE calculation. So that's why I would say check your payroll, because it depends on how that payroll was run. What was it called? How's your payroll company doing that calculation behind the scenes? And sense check it and make sure that it makes sense to you what's coming out. Because if you're getting if you're like, wait a second, this is telling me that I have way less employees than I did, then something might be up in the way that they're running that calculation. So it's a little bit tough to generalize because people have so many different structures. But it is the hardest, I think, for people who are fully commission-based, right? Because what do you do in that scenario? Okay. I know that's not super helpful because the FTE calculation is one of the more complex things that's hard to explain as an answer to a question. But I would check the PPP tracker because that will calculate out also, that will help you figure out what your FTE calc should be, if that makes sense. I have a place for commission-based or other variable compensation. So you can use that and see how that calculates it out, because it can get a little bit complicated in that situation. Sorry, guys, losing my voice. Let's see. Yes. So you deposit the PPP money I paid yourself. So this is the money that you paid yourself. You can pay yourself up to 2.5 times your average monthly salary, which if you're self-employed, probably your entire PPP loan. Yes, because once you pay yourself, you can do whatever you want with it, honestly. So once you pay yourself that money, you can put it in your retirement account. You can put it back in your business, you guys. If you're like, I got bills to pay in my business. And that's why I think it's the silliest thing in the world that banks are actually requiring you, some banks, to show proof of paying yourself, because you could pay yourself the whole thing and then put it all back in your business. That's not a taxable event if you're a sole proprietor, if you're a self-employed person. So I won't go on that rant today, but yes, you can do whatever you want with that money. And if this blanket forgiveness type thing is to pass, likely then you won't have to provide that proof of paying yourself anyway. It would just be forgiven because you'd check a box and you'd get your loan forgiven. Not necessarily. They have to be business deductible expenses. So if you're a Schedule C and you deduct a portion of your home, you may, like a portion of your home utilities, you may be able to get those included. I don't recommend doing that. I guess I'll say that. I don't recommend doing that because I think it's better to just pay yourself the entire amount, and you should be able to do that if you got the right amount of your loan, if you're self-employed, right? If you don't have employees, you should be able to pay yourself the whole thing and not have to worry about rent and utilities, right? You only have to worry about rent and utilities if you didn't use all of the money on payroll. So the easiest thing to do is to use it all on payroll over the 24 weeks and forget the rent and utilities piece. But I think, and I would talk to your bank about their stance on this, because it's not overly clear in the Treasury guidance whether your own like portion of utilities and things like that would count in your own home. But in my thought process, I could see where, as long as you had really good documentation and you can show that you deducted that amount on your taxes previously, that might count if you're looking and needing other things to spend PPP on. Okay. All right, last one. I promise. I get this question every single time, and I will tell you, you have 10 months. You have 10 months from the end of your covered period to apply for forgiveness. So there's a lot of reasons, and I keep being mad at myself because I don't have, and if Bree's still on here, I don't know, she had to leave, I think. The Gusto article that I wrote goes into kind of the pros and cons of waiting or applying now. I think if you are self-employed with no employees, I would wait it out, and your loan is under $150,000, which it would be in that case, right? I would wait it out. I would see what happens. Remember, you have 10 months, and it's going to be way less of an annoyance to do that process if you just wait and see what happens, right? Now, and they haven't really been actually processing. So like the banks have been processing some of them. Some of the banks have been processing the applications and sending them to the SBA, and the SBA has just been sitting on them. They're saying they're going to start processing soon, but I think even the SBA is waiting on what happens with Congress to even start putting the work in on these things, right? So even if you go through the process now, you probably won't get it forgiven just yet anyway. If you have employees, where this gets more complicated is if you have employees and you're sitting here and you've retained your employees to this point, but you think, you know what, I need to lay these people off. I don't have enough work. I may have to let some people go. In that case, it may behoove you to apply sooner rather than later, because it is good to apply for forgiveness, just especially if you're trying to get safe harbor, to apply for forgiveness when you have the highest number of employees. If that's not a concern for you, then I would wait it out and just see what happens. But I did write an article for Gusto that specifically goes into the things to think about and whom it might make sense to apply now and who might want to wait. Let's see. I did mention the POO and the PPP. As long as they're different weeks and they're not at the same time, you should be able to use both. Okay. I like this. Did I say squirrely? I probably did. I like that word. There are probably more interesting words that I could use for that. Okay, guys, so I think I got to most of these questions. If I missed your question, I am sorry. I will be back here next week. Next week, we will see. Either it's going to be another week of nothing going on, or there may be a lot going on. So I have a feeling now with just negotiations the way they're going, we will know something else next week. So I will be here to bring it all over to you. So make sure that you're subscribed, make sure that you're in the Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners group so that you know what's going on. Because like I said, I want you guys to be the first to know of all the exciting things and the things that might help you and the things you might need to kind of get on as fast as you can. So y'all are awesome. I hope you have a fabulous, wonderful weekend. I'm in my fall attire. I'm ready. It feels like a fall weekend around here. And now I have the nails for it too. So exciting day. All right. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.